It's story time, story time, story time. Hey, today's story time for July 26th, 2013. The story is entitled Time Machine, where something went horribly wrong. This man has been working on his time machine secretly in his laboratory for many years now. And a lot of people looked up to this man because he was a man of all jacks of trade. He's gifted as a scientist, won prestigious awards, and received many honors for experiments that he did for the government, as well as for even other private industries. And one of his secret achievements that he's been working on was the time machine. He's done experiments where he would send things back to time, but the only thing is that when he would send it back, he couldn't get them to come back to the present time. So he was really quite puzzled by that. And, like he would send an object and program the machine after so long to have it back in time to come back to the present time where we are now, like in 2013. But see, he was having all kinds of problems with this time machine because it wouldn't do that, as like I stated. So he said, one day, I'm going to get in this time machine and do it myself. But first he wanted to make sure that he had it all worked out to a science. So that when he got into that machine, that he would come back in one piece and return back to this present time and not in some parallel string of a universe of time. That could be horribly wrong, other than the way it's supposed to be right now. A lot of people, like when you look at Sigmund Freud and you look at scientists like Isaac Newton and Einstein, they all think that time machine and time travel is possible. But the same problem that we face today, even though technology has come very far, is the same problem that was in their day, except they didn't have the technology that we have today that they only dreamed about. The technology you have today is a lot more so than what they had in their time. But the thing is, even today, we face the same dilemma. The time machine is not possible, or time travel is not possible, because the technology just isn't there yet. But I think in time, one day it will be. Einstein, Isaac Newton, and all, and Sigmund Freud seem to think so, according to their equations and notes that they've written, many notes and volumes of, that seem to prove otherwise, that one day they think we will have the bandwidth or the ingenuity, engineering of some type, to be able to do this. So anyway, that's the same way he thought, and that's what inspired him to build this time machine. Like I said, he did try to make things come back, but they wouldn't come back to the present time. So one day, he set this cat in the machine, and it was set for time. He was able to fix the software, and he was able to put it back into the 1920s, and send it back in time. The cat came back, and everything appeared with the cat perfectly fine. The cat was healthy. The cat had energy and acted just normally like it did before. Didn't see any symptoms in it. He waited a week or two, no symptoms, no reverse symptoms, so he said, well, I'm going to get in that machine and do it myself. I think it's about time that I try to transport myself back in time. But I'm going to go back further than the 19th century. I want to go back to the 17th century. I want to see what it was like before modern technology came along. I want to see it firsthand instead of reading about it from some history book or from some tablet with it all written in there so I could just come to it as a quick reference on the web. But I want to really experience it by being really there in that moment of time. One thing he didn't realize is what dangers may be waiting for him there once he teleported there through time to that time. And that's the one thing that he did not count on. He got in the machine. He put in 1776. That was the time when the Constitution was signed into the Declaration for this country. But what he didn't realize is there was a bad thunderstorm that night. And not only that, when he went back into time, he landed in the middle of a field where there was a war going on and guns were just ablazing all around him. So he got out of the machine And he got there okay. But what he came into was really something very horrible. He figured he could get there and hopefully not be in the middle of a war. But when he got there, he was in the middle of a blazing battle between the different people of the country, and the different states and colonies were fighting against each other for freedom and independence, and for slavery, for slaves to be free and so forth. And that battle was going on in 1776. It was a real battle, war, with the northern states, the south states. They were all fighting together as individuals and as colonies and districts, because they didn't have all these states like we have today. He was in the middle of a bad thunderstorm while this war was going on, like musket rifles and cannonballs were going off, and people shooting arrows and bayonets and poisonous darts and things. And if those things hit you, they would kill you. Some bullets bounced off the machine. So what he did is he got out of there and went back in it out of fear and tried to get out of that time period. But at first, lightning hit one of the subducers on the transformer, and therefore he couldn't get out of time. He had to stay there for a night. So what he did is he tried to run and tried to move the machine, but the machine he couldn't move. It was like a capsule; he couldn't move it. So he had to run and hide and hope and pray that the machine would not be too banged up by the bullets. But luckily, when he made the machine, he did make it to withstand bomb blast and bullets. It had bullet like armor, like protection on it that was like a plasma-like shield, and he had that turned on, so the machine didn't suffer any damage. But the reason why it wouldn't take off wasn't anything wrong with the transducers like he thought, because lightning hit it. It's because of the weather. It would not take off because of the storm. So I had to wait until the weather cleared up. So he went and hid behind the bushes and went in the woods and hid there. And went and hid underneath a group of trees and tried to get and seek shelter for the night at one of the motels. The only thing is, though, the money he had in his time wouldn't work with their money. So he had to take the kindness. He couldn't go to a motel. He had to stay with a stranger for the night. So somehow he was a good talker, and he was able to think on his feet and was able to intermezz with the culture there at that time, and he was able to arrange a place where he slept because he studied on their culture and their behavior and mannerisms by looking at literature that was written around that time, so he would understand how to talk in that culture. If you plan to travel back in time, you better know something about that culture. Otherwise you may get yourself killed or get yourself thrown into the brig, or depending on where you're going, or stockade or whatever. But he learned and studied up on that 17th century language and the time period of that time. And he actually got to see some of the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence. So he stayed there the next day, and he was walking around the next morning, looking around, talking, seeing Thomas Jefferson, seeing some of the five forefathers that wrote the Constitution, seeing them all come together. George Washington, just name a few. Madison, just name three of them. They were all there together in Washington, D.C., coming up together, getting ready to have that meeting the next night. So they said, well, I might just stay before I leave, before I head tail out there. The war already stopped. His vehicle was unharmed by the bullets, even though the bullets did hit it, but there was no dent. Like I said, it was protected. The people didn't even know what that thing was out there. They thought it was some kind of alien foreign object. They tried to enter it, but they couldn't because it was technology that was not of that time, and they had no way to get into it. And even as they tried to fire anything at it, it wouldn't mess it up. So they gave up on it and left it alone. But anyway, he went over there just to see them signing and hearing the Gettysburg Address, and them talking about the preamble and all that in front of all the people in Washington. He got to see it at real life, like we read about in history books. He actually got to witness it live, like it really happened, for the first time. Like he's never seen it without having the education of it, because he was educated by history books. But this went way beyond the history books because it wasn't watered down, because he actually got to see it as it really unfolded, just like it really did when it really took place so long ago. And he just couldn't believe it. How much tenacity, how much gravity and how much valor that all these people had for this country in America in 1776. He says, if only these people could see how these people were back then, and how that what made this country so great that stood against the redcoats, and how it made, it made Bonaparte hightail and put his tail between his leg and rocket back to England as quick as he got here. If we could only have that kind of energy today, he was thinking back in his present world and time. What do you think it would really do for the people and for this country? Well, the same thing would happen. Those people that are foreign banks and globalists would hightail and run, because they know America isn't nobody to mess with. And America's not going to stand down because of some idle threats. And they're not going to let people grope them when they go in the airplanes or go in shopping or when they go, on a bus to go somewhere or anything of that nature, or be afraid of threats that don't exist. Terrorism is real, but it's not in people's underwear, okay? That's the whole point of what I'm trying to say. And kids, they do check there when you go in the airport. If you ever gone on an airplane, they do that, and that's wrong. It's inappropriate. And you should stand up and say no against that. It's just like those people back in the early days, they would have shot those people if they did that to them back then. Those people weren't terrorists. A lot of people want to label the terrorists, of George Washington and all them being bad. But history, actually, they weren't bad. They were what made this country free. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be in the same situation that we are today. And if we're likely going to repeat that situation if we don't wake up as Americans. And that's the message that I want to tell you. So he saw all this and he's like, I got to get this message back to the modern time. I got to hurry up and get back home to my people in America and warn them of this impending danger that they were escaping, which is the same danger that we're escaping today. If we don't wake up, we're going to be in that same situation that we were fighting against so long ago. So he got back in his machine and shut the door and put the time in and went back to his right time. He came back and it was successful. It actually left and got him back there real quick. He said, he couldn't tell people that he met with these people because people would think he's crazy, because time travel was not possible, according to the scientists and historians of that time, and even the people in the community would not believe him, and they would shun him and vanish him from the community. But he had to tell it and be creative in such a way to make it sound like to convince people so they would realize, hey, we don't want to give up on our freedoms. We don't want to lose them. We want to be just like those people back in 1776 when we rise up again and we stop the people. We don't want to let people come in here and take over America like we're doing by putting our heads in the sand. We want to get up and we want to do something. So he wrote this book and he sent it out and he talked like he was in third person, even though he knew more about it because he actually saw what went on. He didn't just see what he read about what he learned in high school or college history. He actually learned because he was actually there to witness it the first time, because he traveled back in time, but he couldn't tell that part. And so, the message that he's sharing with us is that we need to wake up as kids. And when something's going on that's wrong, as if teachers in schools are teaching, saying that what you learned about Washington, George Washington, and a lot of these history people that made this country free, saying that they're wrong and that they're terrorists, then you need to report. You need to make a noise and you need to stand up and say no when you're in your classes. Or even as parents, you need to say no. Those people weren't terrorists. They're the people that made this country free. Who do you think you are? This country was free because of those people. And that's what we need to realize. And he really got a real taste of it when he went back in time in his unapproved time machine. But he came back and he just had to tell this story. He says only God has mercy on this country, and only God can truly bless this country if his people would only wake up and listen as kids and as Americans, fellow Americans, and soldiers and police and Marines, that they would all just pray and wake up and realize this stuff before it's too late, before we're taken over totally and we become a tyrannical state where we are killed for things that we shouldn't be killed for, and where we go to jail for things that no one should be jailed for, because they're not things that are wrong. It's just because people don't want the truth to get out. Where they try to block your truth, or where they try to discredit you any way they can because they don't want you saying things like this. It shouldn't be like this. So that's why it's all the more reason that we need to wake up as Americans, whether we're kids or adults. We have a fight in this, all of us do. And we have a right to express how we feel. And we need to say no when things are wrong. in spite of what the movies and what the music and the lyrics say in it to do otherwise. We need to follow what our hearts tell us and what the scriptures tell us, meaning the Bible. Not the Book of Mormon or some other book, but what scriptures say. What Jesus says. We need to follow what he would say, what is right. You know, God wants a country to be free. And that's the message that he brought back with him from traveling to 1776. When Tom got back, he wanted to tell people about this story. But he had to put it and make it so creative to make it sound like he'd never been there. But yet when they read it, it sounded like he was there because the words just leaped off the pages in a way that no other historian or no other book could write it. And that scared some people. I mean, they wanted to brief him. They wanted to throw him in prison. But yet, what he was saying was the truth. But there were a lot of people that started to wake up because they realized that what he was saying was the truth. That God wants America to be free. Just like he wants it to be free. You know, back in those days, they thought and gave their lives for that freedom. You know, people, they lost a lot of lives during that time, during the war. And they lost a lot of lives when they put the Constitution in. But you know what? They did that so we would have freedom. It's not a word we say that we hope, but it's a word that we really should believe and really exercise every day with our rights, with our amendments, you know, with the right to bear arms, the freedom of speech, you know, all those 27 amendments. We need to exercise them, or otherwise we'll lose them. So basically, this is a time machine story where actually he brought it back, and hopefully he hopes and prays still to this day that it will wake people up. So I hope you like that story, because this story is basically what will happen to America if we don't wake up and realize the error of our ways that we are in. Because the way we're going right now is not the way that this country was intended to be. And we need to turn around before it's too late. So anyone that's in government or Marines or anywhere, children, parents, get this message out and tell the people about this. And let's all wake up and say no in the face of tyranny. No to globalization. No to carbon taxes. No to the New World Order. These things will destroy us, and they'll only benefit the few. Don't believe the lies that they're selling. That's what he frantically said at the end of his story. Because that's what they're telling you now. You know, if you're Christian, if you're white, if you're veteran, you're a terrorist. That's totally absurd. You know, and then before you know, it's going to be black people that are terrorists. You know, even Puerto Ricans are going to be terrorists, or Muslims are going to be terrorists. You know, it's a people game. Nobody's a terrorist here in America. And if you're American, you're American, whatever nationality you are. I'm not prejudiced, so we shouldn't be that way either. Nobody should go after kids and children of people that are religious, because we're not terrorists. You know, if you're scared of that, it's because probably you're not living right. That's why you want to make up all these stories and say that people are prejudiced and racial, because they are Christian, because you know Christians have stirred up and changed things for the good, and you're scared about that. But you know, that's because that's what the devil does. But you know, there's a lot more of us than there is of the people that want to destroy this country. And the thing is, we have a good start where we can actually take over. If the police and the Marines join alongside with us, and the firemen and everybody do believe in the same vision to keep America free, we will have to fight possibly and maybe even die for it. I hope not. But that's what we're going to have to do, folks. Because that's what people did back in 1776. We have to do the same thing possibly. I hope it doesn't succumb to that. I pray it doesn't. I hope people just wake up. We need to impeach people that are doing wrong. We need to impeach people that are not doing right. Because if we don't, our freedoms and our way of life will be gone forever. Because it will be taken over by something that's far more evil. You've seen it in the Persian Empire, you've seen it in the Roman Empire, and it's happening even today, folks. So I hope this story will help. I hope it didn't scare some of you kids, because I didn't mean to scare you. But this is the real truth that we're facing. So please, tell your parents about this story. Inform your friends about this story. Tell people, you have a better chance to defend this country than I do. But I'll do what I can, because I'm not giving up. And I'm sending this message out to you as children, teenagers, and college age, and even adults. You don't need to give up either. Don't be scared. We all got to go with this together as one team to stop this evil that's in our land. So you take that story and really listen to it. Maybe play it a few times. And please subscribe down below. Okay? Tell your friends to subscribe, and please subscribe. I'll see you later with another story next week. Even though school's starting, story time is not going to stop. So Don't worry, you never know what kind of mystery or some kind of journey we'll all go on together. So stay tuned. This is Mikel DeSilvis, or Uncle Mike. I'll see you next week with another story. Story time. We tell stories and mysteries, adventures, going on time machine journeys. It's story time. See you next week.